All right. Nice, cool, brisk morning, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. I came across this method of planting when I was a 13-year-old kid back in Baltimore, Maryland. Had no idea whether it was just a good idea like it was it is to brush your teeth, or whether there was some divine wisdom in this. And took me a lot of years to find out what it was. At that time, it was not published anywhere in our books, so I couldn't find it. And then somebody told me one day, there's a fellow over at Weimar, and he's talking like you do. So I called him, and we probably spent an hour on the phone, the first conversation, and we were like brothers from then on. He told me he was a better scholar than I am, and he told me how to find this planting method, where to find it. It's very short, not very much written on it, and that it was given to Ellen White in the night season, she says. She had a dream there, and an angel came to her. I believe it was the angel Gabriel that came to her and gave her this planting method. If you use it, you'll get tremendous results. It's a little bit of divine wisdom for us for this time in Earth's history. Obviously, God knew the history of the world. He knew that we would have all kinds of problems with our food at this time in Earth's history, with the genetically modified foods, with all of the sprays, all of the poisons that create such a problem there. So God gave it to this church for this time here. I went home from that class as a 13-year-old kid. I went home from that class, got all excited about this method of planting, and I planted 30 fruit trees this way by hand. And you'll see that it's a lot of work just to plant one tree that way. Those trees all did wonderfully well. Now, I just barely got those trees planted and in the ground maybe 6-8 months, and my dad was transferred to Oshawa, and from Baltimore, Maryland to Oshawa there. And so I didn't get to see what happened there. But later, when I was in college, at Columbia Union College, it was just a short drive. Excuse me. Later, when I was in college, Columbia Union College, it was just a short drive from there to my old house in Baltimore. And at that time, I was dating a young lady who would later become my wife. So this was a nice Sabbath afternoon drive, and a number of times we went over and looked at those trees, and I just marveled at the growth on those things, how well they had done. Now, every place I've lived from that time until now, and I'm 75 now, I've planted trees that way, with one exception of Shenandoah Valley Academy. I didn't have a chance to do it there, although I planted trees during that time, but not at the academy there. They've all done well. You just get good results. I'll go through some problems that I see sometimes with people planting here this way. But if you use common sense, and you'll have good results there. Proverbs is one of my favorite books. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Your commandments make me wiser than my enemies. I have more insight than all my teachers, for I meditate on your statutes. I have more understanding than the elders, and I obey your precepts. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. This word is even a light in agriculture. This word gives us some amazing things about just growing our food there. Well, since we have such a great promise here, let's ask God right now. Father in heaven, you do such great things for us, and we thank you for that. And we ask you to teach us today and to lead us. Tell us things that we could not possibly know ourselves, and give us wisdom to use it. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. There's my granddaughter. Now, she's a young lady today, but when I took that picture, I think this is at, I want you to see the difference between those two trees. And I want you to know that they were both just little tiny twigs this big when we put them in the ground. One is planted the Ellen White method. The other is planted what we call the forestry method. Now, to be fair to the forestry method, they often have to plant 1,000 trees, one person a day. 3,000? Okay, all right. They plant a lot of trees. Yes. Several weeks ago, I was flying back from Boise, Idaho, and the guy sitting next to me was a forester. And, he was about to retire, so I had a good time picking his brain to see things about forestry there. Even our forests are in trouble. But he was telling me how many trees they plant and how they plant, and yes, they can plant as many as, yes.
Her son is planting them right for the summer.
Oh, really?
Their quota is 3,000 a day.
3,000 a day. Wow. That's incredible. That's a question I asked this forester, and he said, well, it depends, and where they are and how rocky the soil is. And
Where there is, the quota is 3,000 a day.
3,000 a day.
My son made a comment stating it was even worse than roofing.
That's hard work. Yes, it is hard work there. All right, they have a tool with a little step on it, and they'll step on that, push it back, drop the tree in, pull it back, and they've got to go on to the next. So we'll plant a tree out here today, and you can see we could not plant 3,000 of those a day, the Ellen White method there. Just want you to look at the tremendous difference in these trees. There's another picture there. Okay, what is this method? Well, we dig a large hole, and Ellen White did not say dig a 3-foot by 3-foot hole. She said dig a large hole. Okay? Excuse me. You want to separate the topsoil from the subsoil, put it in two different piles. You want to mix into that topsoil compost and maybe 20 pounds or so of soft rock phosphate. Leaf mold if we can get it. I have not seen what I wanted in leaf mold here, but it's available. Lost my place here. Soft rock phosphate, leaf mold, about 4 cups of gypsum in dry areas, 8 cups of dolomite in a wet area. Perhaps, now there are lots of different sources of calcium, so we want to sometimes mix these or have different sources of calcium depending on the pH and the soil, whatever that we're working on. If you're just planting a few trees in the backyard, then maybe we don't need to go through the soil test and all that. If you're planting very many trees at all, it makes very good sense to get that soil tested and to amend that soil for those trees according to that soil, because soils vary so much since Noah's flood there. So we take the bottom 1/3 of that hole, and we fill it with this mixture of rich soil that we have amended there. Now, I can't do this in the United States, but we do have what we call a tree planting kit. After we made that DVD, Planting by the Blueprint, and you can watch it on YouTube, yes. After I made it, I realized that we had a need to make a tree planting kit, make this easier and less expensive for most people that way. So if you were in the United States, I could make that for you and send it to you. Here we'll have to adjust it, and we will this afternoon, or this morning yet. Now, after we have this okay, if you have this, or maybe if you have it back at your tent, go to the go to this page. Okay, go to that page when you can, and it's a diagram of how to plant this tree. Now, it shows again 3 different main sections here. So what's on the screen now, we want to fill the bottom 1/3 of that hole with rich dirt. Okay, then we want to tamp that down some. In other words, we're getting a lot of air in here, and we're getting materials that are going to compact anyway. So I want you to walk on that so that we don't have too much air, because this is going to sink there. Then we put a layer of rock. So you can see this layer of rock here. People say, what size? Well, I've used everything from pea gravel to stones that are as big as softballs there. So often if you have enough rock in the hole as you're digging that hole, just throw it off to one side and we'll use that rock again. If you don't have that rock, I like to use gravel. I like to use maybe 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch gravel. Don't use road base. Road base has all different sizes, including sand in there, and it's made to compact there. What we want is something that's going to be loose in there. Okay, so use a layer of gravel or rock, and we want 2 to 4 inches. Okay, 2 to 4 inches in there. That's going to be a divider between the anaerobic bacteria that are in the bottom of that hole and the aerobic, which is going to be from the aerobic bacteria, those that are working with oxygen, from that layer of rock up. Okay. Now we put a breather pipe. Now this doesn't have to be a pipe. We just need to have something that's going to get air down into that hole there. And we're going to lay that on top of the layer of rock there. Okay. And we're going to fill the next 1/3 of that hole with plain topsoil, and often if you're digging 3 feet deep, you're going to be below the topsoil usually. So you may have to take topsoil from a surrounding area there and use that. But we want to use just about plain topsoil there. This is not, it's not amended there. So from the, we're going to plant the tree, the lower roots in that topsoil there. Then we're going to fill the top 1/3 very much like we did the bottom, with amended soil, with rich amended soil there. Okay. On top of that, well, I don't have it here. On top of that, I like to use a mulch. People have asked me about mulches there. I like to use a layer of minerals around that tree and then a mulch on top of that. Sometimes we use a layer of rock on top of the mulch. Now, if I have a tree in my front yard in a landscaped area, then I'll do that. I'll put that layer of rock on top of the mulch. If this tree is out in the back 40, I'm not going to do that. The reason is because that layer of rock on top will keep the mulch there, keep the leaves from blowing away or whatever we've got there, and it looks neat and clean there. However, in about 6 months' time, the earthworms are going to eat up all that mulch underneath. And so I've got to throw those rocks off, put more mulch down, and put the rocks back. Okay, out in the back 40, I just put more mulch on top. And then what is underneath will get wet and the earthworms will take it down there. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. Now this is all that some people have had to as instruction in planting this way. So this is what Ellen White says. While in Australia, we adopted the plan of digging deep ditches and filling them in with dressing that would create good soil. This we did in the cultivation of tomatoes, oranges, lemons, peaches, and grapes. Now, what is dressing? What is dressing in the field there? Manure is a good thing. Okay, what we raked out of the barn there. Anything that would make rich soil. The man of whom we purchased our peach trees told me that he would be pleased to have me observe the way they were planted. I then asked him to let me show him how it had been represented in the night season and that they should be planted. I ordered my hired man to dig a deep cavity in the ground. Doesn't say 3 by 3, but a deep cavity in the ground. Then put in rich dirt, then stones. The rich dirt goes in first, okay? Then stones, then rich dirt. After this, he put in layers of earth and dressing until the hole was filled. I told the nurseryman that I had planted in this way in the rocky soils in America. I invited him to visit me when these trees should be ripe. He said to me, "You need no lesson from me to teach you how to plant the trees." Okay, our crops were very successful. The peaches were the most beautiful in coloring and the most delicious in flavor of any I have tasted. We grew the large yellow Crawford and other varieties, grapes, apricots, nectarines, and plums. You will find that your fruit tastes much better if you'll grow this way. Now, back then they did not have soil testing and all these amendments that we can get here. Ellen White was very progressive, and I believe that she believed in education, and I believe that she would encourage us to put these things in that we know of today there. I was in Tehama, California. A garden club had invited me there to give a seminar. It was an all-day Sunday thing, and this was not an Adventist group. They put a notice in the Tehama News that this guy was coming and he was going to teach the Ellen White planting method. Well, a young Adventist man there saw that and he was shocked. He thought he was the only man on earth who knew anything about Ellen White's planting method, because even his local pastor didn't know there. And he had planted some trees this way. He was scheduled that very Sunday for that seminar. He was scheduled to fly to Germany to pick up his fiancée and bring her home and get married there. He canceled his trip. He came to the seminar instead. He was so interested in this. After the seminar, and I was exhausted. When I speak all day and do this all day, I'm quite exhausted there. But he insisted that I come and look at the trees that he had planted, the Ellen White method, just reading this little bit of information there. When I got there, those trees were absolutely gorgeous and beautiful there. So you don't need the tree planting kit and the other things. If you just use this instruction, it'll work for you and it'll work well. Then earlier this year, I was in Bermuda. A retired Adventist pastor had read this, what we just read, and he planted trees this way too. Now Bermuda's a small island, and I was all over that island. I think there are a total of 36,000 people or something on the whole island, and quite a population of Adventists there. And he's way down the south end of the island. I looked all over that island for trees and all kinds of plants and whatever. I'll tell you, that man had the healthiest, most beautiful trees in the whole island of Bermuda, and they had been planted just 2 years earlier there. Okay, this is the same diagram that you have in your handout, so use this. We'll go through this just briefly. There are several secrets involved in this diagram. In addition to digging a large hole, you also add mulch and rocks and leaves. Install a layer of rocks. This layer of rocks is very, very important. That layer of rocks changes the electrical magnetic field and puts air into the planting hole area. Okay, so in this diagram, you see I've got the rocks on the top there, and I eliminate that if it's in the back 40 there. Then there's a layer of mulch, and then this is a layer of minerals. And here's the planting hole, but we put these minerals out further in a circle that I want to be at least 9 feet across. So if you make that 9 or 10 feet, because your plant, as your tree grows, it's going to grow out into this area here. Here we have some type of a protector. Now, we're just showing a tin can there, a number 10 can, but anything that protects that tree. This is a baby tree, and rodents, mice, and even some worms would like to get in there and attack that. As this tree grows, it'll get tough, and you won't need that. But it's a baby, and so we have to baby it. We have to make sure that it's going well. Then we have the layer of rich soil mixture here, same as we have down here. Here's the topsoil without amendments. Here's an air pipe. We can use a number of different things for this. Often if the pot that the tree came in is rigid enough so that it won't collapse, when we turn it, I'll turn it upside down in that hole and just put it down there. That's just for air. Now, how we get air down there is less important than the fact that we get air there. So we want air there. Then we have that layer of rock. Now, 3 to 4 inches here, and then the rich soil down here in the bottom again. What makes this electrical magnetic field work is that the bacteria that's down here, the microbes that are working for us down here, are anaerobic. They're working without oxygen. The bacteria that's working for us up here is working with oxygen. They're the aerobic microbes. So if we put the air pipe in the bottom down here, we're working against ourselves. So don't do that. Put it up here. There. You see the bacteria, the microbes need the minerals that we're putting in there, but they also need the organic materials to flourish. So they need the same type of materials, but one with air and one without air there.
Repeat the question. Could you repeat it for the camera?
Yes, the question is, so we've planted the tree this way. Do we have to put any amendments on it after that, the next year and so forth? Yeah, those trees need to eat. So we do add nutrients from year to year. You'll need to put in far less later. Let's say you have trees already planted. Maybe you didn't plant them. You bought a property and you already have planted, already have trees there. So we use the same basics, but we don't dig the hole. We just put things on the surface. And depending on the size of the tree, one tree planting kit, which is about 25 pounds of different minerals there, will treat 3 to 5 trees and we just put it on the surface, then we put a mulch on top of that and water it in. And you can revive older trees that are maybe under stress, and you can have pretty good crops from that. Good question, thank you. Okay, so how do we do this? We dig a deep hole. This one was just done with a backhoe. Anything you can do mechanically, of course, is going to save you. Then you see we're up to the place where we put in this layer of gravel in this case. And then you see I've got a black pipe in there, and I've got a planting pot just turned upside down in that particular hole there. Here's one where there was lots of rock. This was in Northern California, and we had lots of rock as we dug that out. And so we just threw that rock to the side and put a layer of rock back in there. Okay, then we put the amendments in there. In this particular planting, the fellow didn't have fencing up yet for deer, so we put in a temporary fencing around each tree, but this is the gopher fence. Now this gopher fence in this case is only this big. Don't do that. Cut off a piece of gopher fence that's going to be 9 or 10 feet in length, and you put that around. That'll fit into that 3-foot hole just about right there. Okay, there's the temporary deer fence there. If you have this situation, then you put that temporary fence around, put some stakes in that, because the deer will just push that fence in and they'll come right up and eat your tree through the fence. These trees get 2 or 3 years old. They're strong enough and healthy enough that they can survive some of these attacks on them, but when they're little you can lose the tree there. Okay, one thing that we want to use is leaf mold or inoculants. And if you were in the garden the other day, you remember we used some inoculants. I couldn't bring very much of that with me on the plane, but you can buy those things. They're the most expensive things that you're going to get in agriculture, whether you use something from International Ag Lab or some other company here. What we are putting in that soil are microbes and mycorrhizal. Now, what's mycorrhizal? That is the mushroom type spore. That's the seed for the mushroom. And as we're walking in the woods, often if you just kick the duff on the floor of the ocean, pine needles and maple leaves, whatever, oak leaves, whatever's there, you'll see something that looks like cobwebs growing through that. Okay, that's the mushroom, that's the fungi type plants. Now, why do we want those? Because they will gather water and nutrients from a much bigger area. If you have a root ball that is this big, let's take a tomato for instance, so we got a little tomato plant we just put in the ground. These fungi plants will gather nutrients from a much bigger area, and they will feed it to those little feeder roots there. So this is really important. Now, of all the things that I do in agriculture, nothing produces better results, greater results, than getting the soil live. In other words, I want your soil to be live. I want my soil to be alive with this type of fungi plant. And you'll just get tremendous results that way. So we want to do that. Look at this. We've got, if we can see it here, we've got the roots here from the plant, but the mushroom is gathering from a much, much larger area there. Here's another, there's another example of it there. You can see that's a tiny little pine tree there, and you can see the roots. And this here we're probably gathering from 5 to 10 times larger area than the root itself there. So use that. It's very, very useful. Most of our crops today are grown on mostly dead soils. Get the inoculant. If you can't get the inoculant, go into the woods and rake up something, look for that cobweb type thing growing in the mulch. And if you get that with a little bit of soil with it, it'll work very well. There. Okay, that's the end of that. Before we go out, I want to go out and actually plant a tree out here. So just so we have an example of it. Before we go out, I want to tell you that if I think I have a couple of these left. The refractometer, if you saw me use this the other day, it's a useful tool. This one Canadian dollars, I think is right at 130, I think $127. Call it 130. Let's see, we said that it would retail for 100 and I forget what it was. There. Was it 140? 145, I think. Anyway, that's the retail on that. And while I'm here, as long as these last, you can buy them for what we just quoted here. And there, that's, yeah. Then this one is 200 US. So what would this be here? This is a 260. Okay. This is a complete seminar. This is 7.5 hours of educational material. Was done in a seminar in Minnesota. Was done to a non-Adventist audience there, and it's done professionally. You have all these different subjects here. But instead of listening to 7.5 hours, if I want to know about the Ellen White tree planting method, I can go right to it there. Or if I want to know about planting seedlings or whatever, transplant formula, you can go right to the right thing there. Anyway, we have a number of these available if you want there. Okay, let's change gears here and let's go out behind that house and help Mel to dig that hole and plant that tree. Let's see what we can do.
Yes. Okay. Now, in recent years, now you'll see that in that DVD that I'm using cottonseed meal. Now, cottonseed meal for many years was a very, very good source of nitrogen as well as some other minerals there for us. Now, cotton has become largely genetically modified today. So I don't think we can get organic cottonseed meal anymore. You do not want to use anything that's genetically modified. We have huge problems, so don't use anything that's genetically modified. Avoid the cottonseed meal. Avoid anything that's genetically modified or that has glyphosate, that's Roundup, sprayed on it. Crops like spinach and wheat, which are not genetically modified. But we spray those with glyphosate, Roundup, in order to help ripen them and preserve the crop.
Check it.
So, thank you. Okay, we're on. So avoid anything that may be genetically modified there. Now, what to use in place of that? Any good seed meal. Now, when we eat bread, we don't eat the straw, do we? No, we eat the wheat because the energy and the nutrients are concentrated in the seed. So any seed meal, you could use oatmeal instead of cottonseed. The reason we use cottonseed, one reason we use cottonseed. One reason we use cottonseed is because it was a winter crop. We can't use it anywhere else, so it was cheap, and we would make a meal out of it. But use anything. Use any seed meal. I think we're on again, aren't we?
It's an on and off.
On off field. Okay, so use it. Well, we're off again now. Use any meal, any seed. Crunch it so that it's going to release its nutrients to the
Are you saying crush some seeds and put it in it?
any type of seed. The reason we use cotton is because it was a waste product, and so it was cheap. We throw it away. This was a good source of nitrogen.
What is the best seed you recommend?
Okay. If you were in the tropics someplace, one thing I used was jackfruit seed. Jackfruit. But anything, just telling you, get something inexpensive.
Oh.
Okay. Check.
It's really the wind, so.
Oh, it's the wind. Yeah. Okay. Are we on?
I don't. It's also different.
Okay.
It seems if you turn a certain way, it's on. So stay that way.
Stay this way.
No, as long as it. There you go.
Are we on now?
Stay that way. Don't move your head.
Well, now this is on. This is on. Well, maybe I have to stand this way, huh? Hold my head a certain way. That seems to be it, I think.
Don't look at us. Look at them.
Look this way, okay. Sorry, you guys. Okay, here's another mistake that I see being made. I made this one. Planting trees too low. I'm going to deep hole here. We're going to have a lot of materials going into that. And things are going, that soil is going to sink over the next year. So we want to plant that tree where it has the same, where after it sinks, it's going to be at
Normal level.
at normal level, thank you. Ground level or maybe a little above even there. What happens often is the tree sinks and the graft will get yes, it'll get covered, and so you lose the benefit of the graft of the tree. The tree will put roots out above the ground, so you lose that advantage of the graft of the tree. So anyway, that's
So it's not that the graft is if it's in the ground that it will rot.
No. The top of the tree will be.
yeah. The top of the tree will send roots out, and we'll lose that graft. Now, what happens if you already have the tree planted and it's sunk down in there? Well, use some bricks or something to keep that graft from being exposed to the ground. And that'll work for you. What happens if you can't find soft rock phosphate? And so the clerk sells you superphosphate, and I've had this happen so many times. If it's used at the same rate, if the soft rock phosphate is used at the same rate as the superphosphate, remember the superphosphate can be as much as 22 or even as high as 52. And the soft rock phosphate, the number for that is 3. It's a huge difference there. So if we're using superphosphate at the same rate we're using soft rock phosphate, we're going to kill the tree. It's going to be poisonous. Okay? At the right rate, it will be a good, beneficial nutrient to that tree. But you can. Okay. Here's another thing. Now, planting by the blueprint, you'll see that we're talking about using soft rock phosphate, the recommended rate of maybe 10 pounds to 20 pounds per tree. So what's going to make the difference here? Use it according to the need. Even 20 pounds of soft rock phosphate is okay because it's a slow release. Only three, number's only 3 on that. But it's 3% this year, it's another 2 to 3% next year, and the year after, and the year after. So even 20 pounds is okay for most soils. The superphosphates, the reason we're not using the superphosphates is because they're going to bind up with calciums in the soil to tricalcium phosphate, and so the material is going to be there, but it's bound up in a form that is not available to your plant for many, many years. So that's why we're not using the superphosphate. Now we will use some superphosphate because we need to jumpstart that tree, or in the garden we jump-started those plants now because that soft rock phosphate, it's going to take a number of years to get that phosphate level up where we need it. In some soils we have quite high phosphate, and of course we would back off the soft rock phosphate there. Now trees are babies when they're planted, so protect them from sunburn, from drought, from deer, from gophers, rabbits. It means you need to fence them in most cases. When they're older, they're tough enough and strong enough that they can do just fine there. There's another thing I did not put on here, and I got a call last week from a guy in Maine, and he said, "Lynn, I planted 50 fruit trees and they're doing terribly." So I asked him what he did, and he put the right minerals in the ground, whatever, and then he put in wood chips of all things. Now, there's a lot of talk about the Back to Eden garden method and using wood chips. I want to tell you that man, Paul Gauchi, thank you. Paul Gauchi is a good man, and he's doing a good work, and he's a very godly man. He does not have the advantage of there it is, okay. He's a good man, and he's doing a good work. He's a godly man. He does not have the advantage of the spirit of prophecy. So we have some advantages that he does not have. Okay. I also have soil tests from his garden, from his land, that show that his soil is severely out of balance. Now, what I mean by that is the most conscientious organic gardeners have the soil generally that is the most out of balance. You all right? They have the soil that is the most out of balance. What happens is that over a period of years, the phosphate and the potassiums go higher and higher because they're putting compost and manures onto that garden. And when those get out of balance, when we have too much of any of one thing, it creates an imbalance elsewhere. What's happening is that the calciums and the micronutrients are being crowded out, and so you're getting produce that is not as good. Another thing that happens is people will call me and they say, "Well, Lynn, when I moved into this property a few years ago, I got a big load of manure and put it on my garden, and we had a wonderful garden. And the next year I got another load and we had a good garden. And the third year we had an okay garden." And the farther they go, the less the produce off of that garden. It's because they're getting out of balance. And so then usually it goes something like this. And so last year I got an extra big load, and the garden was terrible. Well, they're getting out of balance, is what it is. So this garden, the recommendation was that we have 4,000 pounds per acre of compost, or well-rotted manure. So avoid the manures. Avoid the manures because of the problems we have with it. But avoid the excesses. To begin with, you're going to need some of those things, but avoid the excesses there. All right. Let's go back to the wood chips here. When we put wood chips into the ground, the microbes are going to eat first. So that means that the microbes are stealing the nutrients, the and nitrogens. The microbes are stealing the nitrogens and the other nutrients there, and so our plants suffer. Now, once this is fully decomposed, then it's okay. If you were to go to Paul Gauchi's garden and see what he's doing there, he is not putting he's not putting he's not putting the wood chips in his own garden. What he is doing, now, if you have a chance to get wood chips, get them. But put them out where you can compost them for a while. Then what he does is when those wood chips are pretty well composted, several years, then he will screen them through hardware cloth, and the fines that come out make a wonderful amendment for your garden. But he is not using that directly in his garden there. You'll find all kinds of problems if you use those directly in the garden there. Okay, how are we doing with that hole back there?
We're pretty near there.
Pretty near there? Good.
I have a question. Can I ask
Yes.
a question?
Sure.
You used to not use wood chips. Is it not okay to put, I was going to put manure around my trees, but you're saying I shouldn't do that?
Don't put manure on today, not unless you absolutely know that those animals have had no genetically modified food at all. Let me give you an illustration for that. We've had a pastor in Camino, California, and he went and got a wonderful load of compost from the city dump, Roseville City Dump. A lot of our municipalities, they would compost this stuff. Yes. Yes, and he had a wonderful garden, great garden. So the next year he did the same thing again, and nothing grew. What was the difference? Herbicides, yes. So when the city's picking up all this stuff, they don't know whether you've sprayed it with herbicide or not. They're not going to separate that.
It was leftover GM food.
Leftover GM food, herbicide, and we're getting some huge problems there. And we're getting another thing from manures is that we're getting food which it is unedible because the taste is so bad. It's not the variety we're growing; it's the what we're putting into that. So let's talk about manures here. Now, what are we getting? We're getting nitrogen, we're getting phosphate, we're getting potassium from the manure. There are much simpler and safer ways to get that, and less expensive to get it from rock powders and other methods that we put in. And it's even less expensive, and it's far easier to apply than getting that load of manure. Let's leave fish emulsion alone. It's a good question. So, you go to the nursery and you want to have, you say, I want to grow an organic garden, and so just sell me certified organic products there. Where do we get those amendments? Okay, we get them from fish emulsion is one thing. Now, pollutants are washed into our rivers and lakes and oceans there, and the tiny organisms eat them first, and then something a little bigger eats that, something a little bigger eats that, and as we go up that food chain, those pollutants are concentrated. and they get stronger and stronger. And finally, the fish is big enough that we can catch it and process it. Part of it goes into fertilizer, part of it goes into food there, and we have those poisons concentrated, particularly heavy metals concentrated. So if we use fish emulsion, it doesn't take very long until we have a toxic buildup in our soil. There. That's another place where we get organic, certified organic products. It's manures. And manures, we've already talked about that, are just plain dangerous. There's so much better sources to get this. Now, in my own garden, can I get you guys' attention?
Hands up! I used to work with the blind, and that's what we always said to the blind. Hands up, and they'd stick their hand up.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the manures. We're getting the GMO, and we're getting buildups. And what about chicken manure? Boy, we feed in the chicken manure. There's arsenic. We put it there on purpose because those birds are only going to last for a few months, and we're going to kill them, send them to the market there. That arsenic controls the parasites in those chickens so that we can get them to market and we don't have them falling over dead. The problem in the chicken pen there. So you get a buildup of that. There are simpler, easier, and less expensive ways to get this rather than the manures. Leave the manures alone. Now, in your handout, this handout, there are a couple of different formulas. One is for garden in a box. It gives the formula there for it. So you will make that formula. It is from all organic, plant-based sources, and you will not get the problems that you get. Now, we go to the grocery store and we buy organic because we think we're doing the right thing. We're actually getting toxins and poisons there. It's certified organic. Plant your own garden with the veganic, those products, that formula that you can get from Garden in a Box. There are two formulas in here. One is Garden in the Box. One is Jared's formula. Jared's formula is for growing in pots. If you can't grow anywhere else, that's a very, very good formula. We spend a lot of time and money making that. It's an expensive formula. You can make it yourself, especially if you have, what makes it expensive is the earthworm castings. If you go buy earthworm castings, they're a pretty expensive product there. You have your own compost pile, you can make it yourself. There.
How do you start a compost that's organic if most of the fruits and vegetables that we're eating now are
Yeah. That's a whole seminar. That's a whole seminar. Yeah. It's a good question, but it's a whole seminar. Yeah.
The thing is, can I use that same mixture on my trees?
Yes, we could use that same mixture on your trees.
As far as compost is concerned, I don't use chemical fertilizer or whatever on my garden. So whatever leaves or whatever's left, I put it in the compost. My grass bed, I don't spray my lawn. So again, you can put that in the compost. You don't have to use food on it. Hands up, right?
Okay. All right. How we doing with that hole back there? Are we about there? Let's make the
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
You know, the box that sometimes the garden in a box, sometimes it's pressure treated.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it has also arsenic in it.
About 2 tablespoons.
Put that in because it's the air causes
Let's get the soft rock phosphate. What do we have? Soft rock phosphate. We want
2 cups. That's 2, 4, 13 cups.
You know what? We measured cups, which I said, but what I wanted was pounds, so we need to double that.
Okay. Another 13. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe put it in
Another 13. 2, 4.
Nobody can see, right? They should make a big circle. No, like a big circle.
Okay, let's go to lime next.
You need another bucket that we're using.
Do we have dolomite?
Yellow bag. Yellow bag.
No bag is dolomite.
We need a second bucket. We need a second bucket. Nice second bucket. Just a second bucket. Second bucket. Oh, there's a blue thing up there. I'll get it. How much are we doing here?
We are doing, we're doing 8 cups for 4 of these full.
Dile a Marcelo que te dé un poquitico más. Bájate. Acurrúcate, bájate. Ahí tienes tu espacio. ¿Le dijiste?
I need a volunteer to go into the house, in the kitchen. Is Felicia here? Is Felicia here? Okay.
Or one of Felicia's sisters.
I need somebody to go into the house, and on the counter, there's a little package about this big of Himalayan salt. Okay? You need Himalayan salt here. Now I want you to use ocean water salt. Himalayan salt has 84 minerals in it, and it also has the imbalances in it. But there are lots of good minerals in it. We're going to use that because we don't have the sea salt today.
Magnesium, Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate.
Magnesium sulfate.
There's 2 different.
Okay, 1 pound or 2 cups.
Right here. It's got a hole in the bottom of the bag.
Hello. So Himalaya salt, what else we can use?
Sea salt.
Use the sea salts.
Sea salt.
Sea salt.
The one is granulated, the one that we use for pickles. That was,
No. That's regular pickling salt. You don't use that.
no?
That's refined salt.
Oh,
Make sure it's not refined at all.
okay.
Yeah. You want all of the minerals in there, nothing taken out, nothing added.
All right.
Yeah. And it'll be kind of a dirty color. It won't be clean, clear.
All right.
Okay.
Some 19. How much in there?
Okay, hang on a second, I'll get that.
Triple superphosphate.
Okay, let's put in 2 pounds, that'd be 4 cups.
Borax.
Borax, we need, yes. We have a cup here. You need
2 tablespoons.
2 tablespoons would be fine, yes. Okay, let's put that over here. Good, I'm glad you found that. Let's use the sea, let's use the salt next. Get you to hold that for me? Thank you. I need a volunteer, I need a lady that can untie this. Thank you. Let's do the salt. Okay, we need an ounce of this.
How much of this?
About an ounce. Okay, we're using this as sea salt. It's not, it's a Himalayan salt, but you see how little we're using in there. This has the 84 different minerals in it. Use the sea salt if you can get it. That'll be better. Okay, can I get you to tie that up and take it back to Felicia before we get her salt all dirty?
Yeah, she wasn't happy.
She wasn't happy at all.
No, my Himalayan salt, no. It's precious.
Yes, the sea salt is a lot less expensive too.
That's right, yeah, this one is very expensive.
Let's see, did we have zinc in there yet?
And not manganese either yet.
And we need manganese, we need iron, we need zinc.
Zinc sulfate, manganese sulfate. How much zinc sulfate do you want? There's a cup.
Let's use 2 ounces,
Which is about 2 tablespoons or what?
about 4 tablespoons.
4?
That's good, that's pretty close. Yeah, that's good.
What was that, zinc?
That was zinc sulfate. Manganese sulfate, do we have that yet?
Yeah.
Okay, let's put in 8 ounces of manganese sulfate, just double what you did with zinc. And where's Mel? Do we have a tree out or not? We got one terrific hole. We don't have a tree.
I'll get a tree if we need a tree. Oh, we're not planting a wild plum. That plant's is that too much? Is that good? Is that less?
That's good.
Question?
Yes.
This size fall for any kind of thing, whether it be fruit or just like
Tomato plant?
We've even done this for tomato plant. No,
that's not a tree, right?
when I went to Brazil, they asked me on the phone.
Hands up! Hands up!
They asked me before I went down there, so how big a hole should we be? And I said, well, you know, it's about 3 feet by 3 feet. Well, everything's in meters there. I said, well, make it about 1 meter by 1 meter, you know. So they dug a square hole like this, which is more material than a round hole. And they measured, and I mean, if they were that short, they kept digging until they had an cube. Yes, 1 meter by 1 meter. And I want to tell you, those were big holes, took a lot of material in there. Those trees did wonderfully well. If you saw the pictures the other night, those trees just grew like crazy. Of course, they have 12 months of growing where we have half of that, you know. So they do have some advantages with that. Yes.
So you put in all these minerals. I know, in my experience, I have a lot of organic compost. What if you dump it in there? Is that wrong? Or?
Well, let's just demonstrate here. Now, we're gonna need, the, I don't think we have any compost here, do we? I don't think we have any compost, but we have, peat moss.
Last year we stole some of the peat moss over the field. Peat moss, want to grab a bale? Want a bale?
Oh, I need a bale of peat moss, yes.
Can you? We stole some out of Mel's compost. Never mind.
What about the compost?
We took some from his composter last year at the bottom. Unrotted. He's a composter over there. We could try and
The
get
bottom of
some.
it was rotten.
Is there anything that's
Well,
rotten in there?
let's go check. Let's go check.
Yeah. So there's some bags of leaves over there, if there are any that
Yeah,
are
that
totally
bucket.
composted.
Okay. Well, I think I need a big bucket. But we want about half of that.
There's a wheelbarrow there.
What's this full or the whole wheelbarrow full?
If you can. I'm gonna need some volunteers, and I'm gonna need to push this circle back a little bit, because we're gonna need to work around this area here.
If everybody goes back, everybody can see, you know.
Yes.
This way we have to be peering on top, so let's move back, please. Good morning. Can you please back?
Who wants to shovel?
Yes, we need more shovels.
The tree is here.
Do we have any more shovels?
Graham has one. We have another shovel.
Mel's here with the tree.
Bigger sticker allows everybody to see. Now you're cooking. The ones in front, if they sit,
Can sit in
allow
the
the
front.
people in the back to see it.
Yes.
It's just beginning to compost. But there is bacteria though. So I don't know when it's completely rotted, but it's semi-rotted. That's not kind of simple.
Is there any more that we can get up there?
Well, we're getting into haze. Scott, do you want to take the rest of it? What about, do you want about double that?
Yeah, we would use all of that more. It's available. Let's empty that.
Okay,
Can you get that much more for me at least?
maybe a half that again. Okay. Not yet? No.
Not yet.
Should we get the rest of
Is
it?
this pretty well mixed now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Graham, let's go back.
There it is, man.
So the tree has to be this big? It cannot be like something smaller? It has to be
Oh, it's perfect. No, it can be a small tree.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful.
What tree is it?
Pear tree.
Instruction says just add water. Just add water.
Okay, I want a child, I want a girl or a boy, a child who's willing to volunteer. You have a volunteer? You want it? Okay, come on. What's your name? Manuel? Okay, Manuel's gonna help us. And you can have one later, okay? Thank you. Manuel, what I want you to do, come over here. Don't fall on your road. When we're doing this, I want you to take. Now Manuel's going to be our helper here, and he's going to take handfuls of this stuff and just throw it around like that. Okay? Now, that's not totally mixed.
That's at the very bottom? At the very bottom?
This is in the very bottom. Okay, let's do another one, Manuel. In there. Okay, then I'm gonna need somebody. I'm gonna need somebody to shovel some topsoil in. And let's open that, so the peat moss.
So maybe we should move the bucket.
And that could be. This is the topsoil. Okay, that would be good. Let's put Manuel over there. Okay, let's open this and let's have this close enough so that somebody can dump peat moss in.
Go lower.
That's good, Manuel. Okay. Okay, now that's enough for a while, Manuel. No more for a while. Okay. We have somebody with a shovel. Are you going to do this? Okay. You can take the peat moss. Dump a shovel full of peat moss in there. Okay. Okay, enough of that now. Now we want to. We start the shovel for the topsoil.
Topsoil first?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, if I can get your attention now. You see we got a deep hole. That's good, that's perfect. We've got a deep hole here. And this is a good place if you have a dead dog or dead cat. Maybe a neighbor you don't like.
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Anyway,
Don't go there.
get rid of something like that, especially in the bottom of the hole. Now, we're going to go around and keep putting things in. We're going to run out of topsoil. We're going to have to take topsoil from some other place here.
Graham's bringing some.
Okay, good.
Right out of the garden.
Great, perfect. Another thing I want to point out is that we could not get everything on this list. We do not have everything on this list. We don't have iron sulfate. We don't have a product called GeoCal. We don't have kelp meal here. So if you don't have everything, plant anyway. Get as much as you can in there. You'll get better results. But some of these things could be added later. And it just will work fine. But do whatever you can with what you have there. Now, there's more than one place to get, you see, phosphate. There's more than one place to get calciums and potassium. So we have lots of different. That's perfect. Wow.
I got last year's potatoes that reseeded themselves.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's throw. Let's see. No, that's topsoil. So let's go. Okay.
Potatoes reseed themselves, just in case anyone didn't know that.
Yeah. All right. Let's call that a dead dog and throw it in the bottom.
Potato? Sure, sure.
There's
That's
a dead
double
dog.
planting. That's double planting.
That's double planting. Yes. Okay. We want to start getting this. This is a very dry hole. We need water over here, so soon too.
Water.
You want the hose behind?
Hose?
Let's dump this out and let's get more. Yeah, just dump this out.
You want to do the same route again?
Yeah.
How many? Just one or two or three?
We're gonna need lots of that.
Maybe a wheelbarrow.
Okay, so at least four.
Yeah, another dead dog.
Okay.
Okay, who do I have as volunteers here? We've
Yeah,
got
we have two
this,
shovels.
this, we got another shovel or so? We're missing a shovel. Anybody see a shovel around here?
No, there was two small ones, one big one. There's nothing there?
Checking some fence.
I think it took it to the wheelbarrow to move. You take it there?
All right, while he's getting that material, I want you to see it. This is a tree protector. And we need something just to keep the rabbits and what have you from eating around the edge there. I want you to look at this. You wanna hold that for
It's
me?
a nice graph.
I want you to look at this. That's good. Dump it real close to the edge here.
Want me to dump it?
Just dump it here. Just dump it real close to the edge. Just dump it.
Watch your feet.
Yep, it's okay. You can get me dirty. There's no way of doing this job.
Watch
with
those two
stink.
bags. The 2 bags don't get it.
Yeah, we got it. There's inoculant in here, and then these are not inoculants also. Okay, I want to go back to the graft here.
It's a nice graph. It looks
It's a nice graft.
yeah, and high. I like the high.
Yes. Now you see this is kind of at an angle, although it's almost flat there. So this is our fruit bearing part. This is the wild, strong rootstock that we want. So this is more disease resistant, more vigorous, and this is less vigorous. But when we graft this to this, then we get the benefits of both. Okay.
So that portion cannot be covered with soil.
We don't want this portion covered with soil. No. Another thing I want to point out here is that the way this was grafted in the nursery is somebody point to north for me. Magnetic north here.
That way.
That way. Okay. So if that's north, what is southeast? Southwest, excuse me. What? Southwest is this way? This way. Okay. Southwest is where we're going to get our strongest sun. Okay? And they graft this so that we want the high part of this, the rootstock, the high part of that, to face southwest. That's where we're going to get the strongest sun. Okay? And this is grown in the nursery that way.
The angle.
With the angle coming down this way because we want to protect that from the sun. Besides that, we want to bring this down here so we can know how this grew in the nursery. Another thing that we want to do is to, if possible, plant this in the same orientation that it grew in the nursery. So we know how it was grown in the nursery, and we want to plant it the same here.
Question. The rodent protector to be 2 feet wide by 10 feet long, correct?
Oh, yes, yes,
Thank
okay,
you.
yes. Yeah, now this is a rodent protector too, but she was talking about the,
Why this southeast, southwest? Why?
okay,
Yeah, why?
because this is the graft part is the weaker part. And so we don't want to burn that with too much sun.
Also, the rootstock is hardier, and in the wintertime in northern climates, this becomes liquid when the sun is shining on it, and when the sun goes down, it freezes rapidly. So this is hardier than this. So this freezing so fast will cause it to crack. And the more delicate the tree, the more the propensity of that cracking and causing damage.
Thank you. Thank you. Good point. Very good point for us here. Okay.
The water's here.
And we have water there too. Okay, let's just get started with this now. We're still missing a shovel.
No, it's behind
It's only got 3 shovels.
There's 2 there, there's 4 now.
Okay. Let's see, it's manual.
Jump the fence now.
I want you to put another bucket there. I'll tell you what, can you hold that for me? Can you hold that for me? Okay, be careful that the things don't fall out. Okay. All right, let's put it, we need a shovel full of this compost over here. Into it.
Topsoil here.
Then we need topsoil, put some compost in there.
Topsoil behind.
Okay, go ahead and do that. You're doing the topsoil, just dump that. I'll be glad for you to help, but you probably need somebody to hold it. There. Okay. Yeah. Now, remember, we're feeding the microbes in the bottom of that hole, and these have to be anaerobic. Okay? So we want compost, we want some topsoil, we want some minerals. Manuel, put another spoonful of minerals in here. Yeah, more.
More of this.
More of this. Okay. And I'll tell you what, over here, we can start taking it. You can start taking it here. Okay, I need somebody on a peat moss. Let's get some peat moss in here.
Is the quantity like inches wise or by eye?
Remember that Ellen said layers of material that would make rich soil. And what I first did is I was careful to mix all of this stuff together. And what I find is that it really works better. It really works better if we have different layers in there, because some of these things tie up in bonds and are not available. They're more available if they're different layers. Yeah, we got another bale on it. We can do it.
More of this.
More of this.
When do you need the gravel?
We're going to need the gravel, yes. Put it up there.
Do you need somebody to give a hand?
If you'll start using the grass clumps here.
Okay. You know what to do. You want to help Mel.
What's your first name?
Marcelo.
Marcelo. Okay, I've asked Marcelo, can I get your attention?
Hands up!
Okay, I've asked Marcelo to start using the clumps of grass, because that grass way down there will not be able to sprout there, so we want to get that in. We want to reserve some of the topsoil to the very top here.
Graham bring some more. Graham's bringing more.
But keep going around the circle like that. There.
This one's there. Now we're going to put a pipe in.
Not
When
yet.
does the pipe goes in?
We want to fill up a little better than a third of that hole. Then we want to compact it.
Just now.
This is you got a wheelbarrow topsoil here.
Yeah.
Oh, great, perfect. Just go ahead and dump it here. Bring the wheelbarrow down and just dump it here. Okay, I'm not going to use this. I do want to show that. Bring it out. Okay, I'm down in the hole. Oops.
Keep it round. Doesn't matter.
Let's just put it to the outside of the hole. Okay. I can get your attention.
Hands up!
Okay, if you have a gopher problem, a rodent problem that comes through the earth, then This is what, 9 feet, I think, by 2. Okay, so let's take this out. Okay, if I can get your attention, please. Okay, this has to overlap enough. Ouch. This has to overlap enough. And let's say where it overlaps that we end up, incidentally, don't do this without gloves. This is very, very sharp here. Where it overlaps, if we have as much as an inch, if it buckles and we have as much as an inch, that gopher will go round and round this until he finds it, and he'll get in. Now you've got him trapped in here. So you've got to make very, got to be very careful that we knit this together tightly. There, do you have anything you can?
I was trying to get you twisty ties, but I
Okay.
just stole some wire off another one. But
Okay. Let's see if we can do this thing.
Improvise.
Yeah.
That's only if you have a gopher problem.
If you don't have a rodent problem, don't worry about it. Yeah. Now, while we're doing this,
No, they
you want to hold this? You just hold this. Okay, while we're doing this, can you get your attention here?
Hands up.
A temporary solution to gophers and rodents of all different types. Thank you. Temporary solution to rodents and gophers is to use castor oil or castor bean meal, and that will scare them away. They don't like the smell. I'm going to have to quit talking and go back to this. Thank you, Mel. Okay. Okay, so several things I want you to look at. We've got that tight, we've got this around the outside, and now we're ready for the layer of gravel. We've got some water here. I think I want to put some water in the bottom of this hole.
remember to come on the gravel has sand in it.
Yeah, some of it does. You want to pour water over the... No, let's just use it. Okay.
You attempt to scrape the stone off the dock.
There's no water behind you.
Oh, great.
That's very difficult.
Unless you, well, before.
That's not what you want to use.
There's a fork around there.
Just the gravel. It stops.
Yes, we're going to need lots more water.
Let's see.
You have to screen that. Let's put it in. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? We do have a screen. Could you grab me the extra hardware cloth? The extra hardware cloth there? We could screen it with a hardware cloth.
We could. We could screen it with a hardware cloth, which is a good idea. But let's do another thing. If I can have children, I need some volunteers from the children, okay? See, we got lots of rock over here that was dug out of that hole. You guys willing to pick that up and put it in there? Be careful. Be careful you don't...
Just throw it in. Don't get too close.
Yeah, just throw it in. Drop it in there. Okay. That's good. Just keep doing it.
That's okay.
Hey man,
No stand, no stand.
Yeah, the big ones here. Just throw these in.
that's your chance, man. Some nice wood.
Put a bucket on it.
Anybody
What we don't want. What we don't want.
not the idea. No, I did one already. So I'm fine.
Shake it. Let's shake it. Let's shake it. Wait. Let me go. When you put a bucket there, put it right in the bucket.
Can we get that first? Can we get that first?
Got a kid behind it. You don't want to move from behind there. Just stand back from here. You might just not see you.
Tell you want to come over here? Just come push you over here. Yeah, the reason we're screening this, problem is because we want a barrier here between the aerobic and the anaerobic, because we don't want sand in there. You want a barrier. It's going to hold some air in there. People usually say, oh, that's for drainage. No, it's not. It might help with drainage. Putting it in there also.
That's good. Watch your head. They're on conk in the head.
Okay, people say it's for drainage. It's not. It's for the insulation barrier there. It might help with drainage, but we're changing the electrical magnetic field. How thick is the gravel? We want the gravel to be 2 to 4 inches thick. So we're pretty close, I think.
Hey, what? You guys gotta move a little bit, man.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, boys, for the help. We have enough of that rock. Thank you. Okay. Well, let's put a little more of this gravel that you got. I was telling these boys we had enough of theirs. Let's go ahead and put this in. Is this finish up what you're doing there. That'll be enough. We'll call that good. Go ahead and finish that up. Yeah. Okay, who can tell me what goes next? Who can tell me what goes next?
Hands up.
The pipe, yes, the pipe. Do we have pipe? Do we have
Old pipe or a pot.
yeah, or an old pot or something we can just put?
Someone just run and grab the pots from down there. There's a bunch of pots. Empty tomato pots. That'll work.
Tomato pots, okay.
Actually, they're kind of weak.
Double them up or triple them.
Okay, if this were at my home, I would not use this pot. And the reason is it's too flimsy.
You can double those up.
Yeah, we can double these up. This will fit fine. I think it's too flimsy. It would collapse. Yeah, this one is, these are small.
Two of those together, though.
These are too flimsy, but we put two of them together. We can use it there. Okay, and we just want to put this upside down.
Plastic,
Plastic. You can use plastic, you can use pipe, you can use pipe towel, anything that way. What we're doing is getting air into that hole. I don't want those. I don't want those. What we're doing is getting air into that hole. How we get it is not nearly as important as the fact that we get it there. Okay? So let's put this down here. I got these others, are they coming apart?
Wow, we're two of them, I think.
Well, we got three of them here, and I was hoping to do a little more.
There's more coming from the garden, I think.
Okay.
Doesn't work from the garden. Here's the freezing.
Oh, okay. We'll put these two together. Okay, these things are, what's that? Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, they don't feed it.
Okay, let's just put these in the bottom of the hole.
Only the big ones.
Oops, sorry. Careful. Careful with that. Okay, do we have any more? Okay. All right, let's call that good. And now let's use plain topsoil. So we want to
Topsoil is that one.
well, this one and this one. We're going to need more topsoil. But let's start
This is
with
sub.
one
This is
here.
sub.
This is all topsoil.
Are we putting that on? Is that?
Let me take a picture.
Okay, Mandy, I want you to put that off to the side because we're not going to use that right now, but we are going to use it later, and we'll need you later. Okay, boys, we're gonna take this soil, so I need you to move back over there, okay? And if you move over there, you can carry that for me like that. Thank you. Okay, can I have somebody take that tree?
That's topsoil. Topsoil is over there.
Just topsoil.
Yeah, topsoil is that one. Yeah.
Wow, but some of it's topsoil from the hole, others garden topsoil.
Darker stuff there. Let's see, we still have some
Can you move the
Quadri-
PFAS bag for me?
grass, so I'm gonna bury those. Okay, I need a strong man to pick that up and put that in the hole for us. The tree. That's just, well, you can leave it in the pot for right now if you're gonna measure. Okay, we're way too low, okay? So let's take it out. means we're gonna be growing potatoes in there too.
I'm telling you.
So we need to raise that probably about 6 inches. Which means we're gonna need more topsoil from above someplace there. While they're doing that, we've gotta raise this a bit. Let me talk to you.
Here.
Let me talk to you. Several people have asked me about companion planting. And if you go to Leviticus, we can read it later, but when we go to Leviticus, we are told not to interplant. And a lot of people say, well, you plant carrots with...
That's it,
Yes, not to interplant. God said, don't do that. When you plant your vineyard or your orchard, don't interplant.
You mean mixed species?
Can I try it?
Pardon me? Don't mix the species. Don't mix the species there. So let me give you an illustration. This is an old Indian tale. They say that the American Indians would take a squash plant, which is a heavy feeder. They would take a corn plant, which is a heavy feeder, and they would plant beans in that same hill. This is all interplanted there. So the corn grows up, and there's a place for the beans to climb up on, you know, sounds like a good idea. And then the squash or pumpkin plant has big leaves, and it shades the soil. And so they say this is a good thing. They all work synergetically together. I thought, wow, this is a good idea. I'll try it. So I did. I planted the corn. I had a place for the beans to climb up. When the corn was ready to pick, I'd pick it, and had to be real careful or I'd break the bean plant. But you see, the bean is putting nitrogen into the soil, so it's feeding the corn and the squash or pumpkin plant there. So it sounds like a really good idea, and I did it. And then I read this thing in Leviticus, and Deuteronomy says something about it also. And so I thought, well, I'm going to separate these. So the next year, I planted the corn in its own little plot. Now this is the same area that I interplanted with, the corn in its own little plot. The beans, I had to provide stakes or trellis for the beans, and then the squash plants. So they were.
Sit on the tractor.
They were each. Here, boys. By themselves, just each by themselves there. You know what? I harvested more corn and beans and squash when I had them individually than when I had them together. So there's some divine wisdom. We're told all kinds of things in the Bible that help us there in the spirit.
And Leviticus, what's the chapter?
I didn't hear that.
Where in Leviticus? Where in Leviticus?
You know what? When I get back there, I'll look it up in my Bible and give you the text for it.
Lynn, could you still plant the beans and the corn next to each other, but just in their own individual rows?
You could. Let me tell you something that's happening here. What happens is, let's say we have tomatoes in the ground. They exude off of those little feeder roots, and it exudes a little jelly-like substance off the end. It dissolves. Boys, if you be quiet. Boys, if you be quiet. They exude that little jelly-like substance, and it is digesting the rock particles and the organic matter so that it can take it up. Another thing that it's doing is it's feeding the microbes. That jelly-like substance is feeding the microbes. And what comes out of a tomato plant is feeding the microbes that are the best for the tomato plant. And the mycorrhizal that we saw earlier. So if we have a whole bed of tomatoes or corn or beans, you see the right stuff is being exuded into that soil. If we have them mixed, then we have a mixture there and we're not getting as good results.
I guess my question is, how far apart do they have to be planted? They could be in their own particular rows or patches, but how far apart?
Depends on how far those roots are going to go. So just keep them far enough apart. In the garden down here, we suggested at least 5 feet apart from one row to the next, and if you have the room, make it 6 feet. Yeah. So, things will grow big. If you have a small backyard, of course, you have to crowd it a little bit more.
Right.
Okay, how are we doing here? Well, one of you guys, are you willing to get in there and just kind of stomp it down for me?
Yeah. Can you stop that little boy from doing that?
Let's go over here.
Dazu, come on, one sit. Dazu, come on, one sit. You want sit?
It's just for a demonstration. Oh, that's good. I need somebody to pick this tree up and put it in here again. This one. Oh, we got 2 trees. Okay. Let me ask you. All right. We can see the graft here.
Oh, it has to be above the ground. Yeah, right.
Okay, take that off right now. Okay. You see the graft? Okay, how does that compare with the side over here?
Still too low. I think it's still too low.
It's still too low. You need to bring that up.
Yeah, we're waiting for the top soil. We don't have any more.
Oh, it's here? Okay. Yeah, take that out. Okay. Yes, that has to be above the ground, and that's going to sink. That's going to sink. So we need to build this up enough so that when it does sink, it'll still be above the ground.
Do you need more topsoil, you think?
Yeah, we're going to need more topsoil. So you want to stomp it down for us again? So where we are? Okay, let's measure that tree again, see how far along we are. What does it look like? Yeah.
This is slope too, eh?
Well, it's sloped also, so the wind came straight out. I think we're good. Let's call that good. Okay, now I want everybody here to vote. No, I want you to put that back in the bucket.
With the bucket. Oh, okay.
Put the bucket back in now. Okay, we've got 2 trees here. Can you see these? Can you see this? Which one of these trees is healthier? Yeah, everybody says that one, right? In agreement?
It's fruiting though. I don't know.
Well, they're both fruiting. They're both fruiting, yes. Okay, now I know what's going to happen, so let's take the weaker tree and put it in the yellow light. And we'll put the healthier tree over there. Thank you.
Doesn't want to sit? Doesn't want to sit?
What is south? Supposed to be southwest.
The high part should be southwest. Somebody point to southwest for me. Southwest?
Don't do that.
Okay. Now, when you go to buy a tree, look carefully. First of all, get a grafted tree. Spend the money to get a grafted tree. If you had a great pear and you thought it tasted real good, and you go and plant the seed from that, you're going to get a wild tree. Okay, so you're going to be spending years growing that tree and wasting that space and those nutrients, and then get something that is not edible, that is weird shaped or doesn't taste good or whatever. Think about it, you're not exactly like your mother or your father or any of your grandparents. We're all a mixture of this genetic pool. So is this tree. So there are thousands of mixtures that have come down here. Just dump it here, thank you. Yeah. So in order to get a pear that we want, we need that grafted tree, And I know it costs money, but it's so much better. Spend the money and do that. Just about all of the trees we need, the fruit trees we need to have grafted. Avocado is one that you need to have grafted. Peaches, sometimes you can get a good tree by planting the seed, but usually you just not so much. And if you have plums, if you have any plums, please don't save the seed. They are notorious for being bitter, nasty tasting fruits. So don't plant it by the seed. You'll have a wonderful tree and fruit if you get the grafted tree there. Can I get you guys to take this pot out? So you want to take this out of here.
I don't know how to cut.
You have to shake the sides. You have to loosen the sides.
Okay. Manuel? Manuel?
No, I got it.
We're going to need you again.
Take it all out?
Yeah, take it.
You have to stop the sides.
Put it on the side. Hold on its side on the ground.
Put it on the side.
Put it on the side.
From the bottom.
Stop till you lose
The bottom and the side.
the
Good?
Yeah, it's loose.
Does anybody have a sharp knife? We'll just cut it off. Just cut it off. Anybody have a sharp knife? Anybody have a sharp knife?
I got clippers. Maybe
Oh,
10
that'll
snips.
work. Okay, that'll work.
Yeah, put that in here now, the bottom.
Good, go for it. 1, 2, 3. Just peel it off. Peel it off. Really at the base in there still too, right? Exactly.
It's gone now. Let's lift it a little bit. That's good. Oh yeah, turn it the way we need to turn it. Okay. Now, at this point, if there are any broken roots, we need to prune them off. I think this one is okay.
Can I eat this?
You don't want it going up.
I can put some soil on there.
Yeah, put some soil on there. Hold that down.
Lynn, do you put it on the flat rock as a base?
Okay, somebody asked if we put that big rock in there. That was added later. If you go back to the book called Are We What We Eat, that was written by Herbert Clarence White, grandson of Ellen White. And he wrote that years after Ellen White's death. He put a big rock in there, and he put it for an anchor. Ellen White didn't talk about that, and most of the time that thing is just in the way. She didn't talk about it, I don't use it. You can use it if you want. Don't use it for sure. If you have a tree that has a taproot, don't use it there, just get in the way.
Where's the stone?
Right here.
You just stop that around a little bit.
You need to put with this.
Not yet. No, not yet.
Not yet.
Hold on.
Grandpa took it. Grandpa took it.
Hold it.
Here.
Yeah, keep it straight, huh?
There you go.
Excuse me, Lynn.
Yeah.
Can you repeat what you said about the root there?
No, don't press on the tree. Don't touch the tree.
You said something about the root?
Why? Did he eat it?
The root is broken. You gotta
So he's gonna save it
cut
for
it
you
out.
guys?
Okay, we need to finish this up.
Okay, come on.
topsoil.
We need more water. Who's got water? Okay.
Put it on.
Yeah, just put some water in there.
More? Everything?
Yep, that's the whole thing. Okay, we're gonna need more water. There. Yeah. Okay, let's get,
Everything?
not yet, I just used another bucket, we'll use that in a minute though. Okay, let's get more topsoil in here on those roots than just plain topsoil. So what I'm doing, is I'm putting plain topsoil.
Hands up.
Okay, what we're doing is we're putting plain topsoil on top of those roots. I don't want to put those amendments onto the roots directly. Now, this is a baby again, and we don't feed baby steaks or gluten. We feed them baby food, milk to begin with, and then baby food. So we want to feed this tree baby food, and then as it matures, it can get out and get those minerals there. Let's put one more shovelful of this right here. That one about right here. Right there. Okay, that's it. Okay. All right. Now, we want to go back to what we did in the bottom of that hole. So we want compost. We want peat moss.
Okay, you want to take care of that one?
Yes, I need their shovel.
Excuse me?
And we do need somebody to hold that tree straight. Yes, you do the peat moss. Let me go this way, okay?
Do we need some of
Let me
this?
go here. Okay, Manuel, I need some of that now, yes.
Come this way.
Can you grab me a pair?
I don't want to know.
Can you grab me a pair for me?
This is
Can you grab me a pair for me?
Okay,
Can you grab me a pair for me then, sis?
okay, Manuel. That's enough for right now. That's good. You did a good job. Yeah. Okay, we have, let's put some topsoil in here too. We're getting compost and peat moss. Let's get topsoil in here too. We want a mixture of this. If you plant,
Grab me a pair for me.
is it your turn?
I don't know.
Okay, back up, please.
A pair on the other
If you
tree.
plant in pure compost, compost is a good thing, but if you plant in pure compost, you will not get good growth and good produce. So we need some of it, but not too much.
Can you grab me a pair for me?
Okay. Yep, we want to fill that thing right up to the top. There.
Topsoil as well.
Topsoil?
Topsoil, yes, we need topsoil. There's some,
Should we
we
pack
want a
this down
mixture.
first?
Pardon me?
Should we pack this down first?
Go ahead and fill it, then we'll pack it.
Wait till Brian.
Okay. One more time, man. There.
Should we be leaving this exposed?
It doesn't matter right now. We're gonna uncover it.
You want to get more?
Thank you, Manuel. That's enough for now.
You could probably just push some dirt down the hole anyway, the sides.
What's that?
Yeah, I guess we're there.
Yeah, just take all everything.
Yeah, these ones here, yeah, the leftover.
Put something in the ground. Like that. So that was my thing. That's peat moss. We were too big to be debt free, including no mortgage. So whether it's Lord changes our
Okay, we need more topsoil.
Yeah, they're coming with some more.
Oh, use that. Use that.
This one is good?
Yeah, that's good.
That's sub. That's sub. This is sub.
Yeah, go ahead and put that in there. Okay, what I want to do now with the topsoil, that's good, is to make a berm, make a dam all the way around here so you can put water in it and it will soak down.
With the topsoil?
With that soil.
Yeah, with this one.
Let's take these and drop them in here.
Oh,
Let's get rid of this stuff. There, yeah. That's good. Okay. We probably will have to use more topsoil or more of that soil on the lower side. But I want him to dam all the way around so the water soaks in.
With the PMO, sir?
Not with the
Not with this one, with the heavy soil.
Hold on.
Okay, so at this point, we just want that soil.
No, don't.
No more of that. No more of that. There. Okay.
You have to get a soil. What we did today makes no sense for your property.
Let's put some here, particularly around the edge.
The soil test tells you how to make it.
Right here.
If you make a trip to the US,
Okay, that's enough of that.
okay. To a friend's house,
Right here.
get him to send a mixture, much less money, maybe $100 or something, everything. They'll ship it to your friend's house and you just take it home.
Okay, they're having some more real topsoil.
What is it?
So you want me to fill up the sides here with this one?
They can make this premix.
Fill up the sides with this. We got a little earthworm here. We define very earthworms in the soil. Yeah. So we're going to put this guy in here because we want him to multiply. Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, now.
You need some more there?
That's irrigated into the oil, that's chemical, that child can't play with that. You can't play
Put
with
it down.
Okay. I wonder.
Excuse me.
All right, I'm going to take over Manuel's job. Thank you, Manuel. You did a great job. Okay. We still have. Pardon me?
Look at the leaves on it.
Yeah, we have some this tree. This tree is under stress, and the root. There was when you go to buy the tree, look carefully at that graft. Make sure you've got a good graft. Make sure it's not infected with wireworms or something else. There are worms that will get into that under the bark, and you could put all kinds of poisons on them and you couldn't kill them because they'll work underneath the bark and sometimes kill the tree. So now we still have maybe a quarter to a third of our mix left here, and I'm going to put some on the top. Thank you. And this tree is going to grow and put its roots out into the outside here. So we're going to make a circle that is at least 9 feet in diameter. Okay.
You're gonna get dust in your eyes and ears in your eyes.
It's still not, until it's passed it down.
A little bit of water.
We may have to tie it. I have to tie it there. Okay. Let's just dump this out.
More uphill, so it's gonna wash down. That's what you're doing.
Okay, now
Hands up! Hands up!
Now, with the subsoil that we have left, if you make a berm on the lower side, you make a dam out here, it'll hold the fertilizer, and if you're irrigating the whole big place, it'll hold the water. There's no point in a dam up there, because that's uphill, it's not going to flow that way. So we're going to hold that fertilizer, and we want to hold that water right there. We have another bucket of water someplace, do we? Yeah, right there. As wet as this soil is, or as dry as it is, I think we could easily use, let's just make the dam here. I think we could easily use 20 gallons of water with this tree. I'm going to have to let that soak in there, yeah. Where's Mel?
Malchus?
I'm going to leave this for Mel. To spread that soil there and make that there so we can go finish this up and running out of time. Okay, this is the inoculant called Eden. So if you make a mistake like this, go back and correct it the best you can. You don't want to dig that tree up again. You could, you know. What's that? You want to put this on the roots. Okay, that's the one called Eden. This one is transplant formula. I can do the same thing here. Here, if we do what the Bible says, this is what we do with it. Okay? For the first 3 years, we do not let this tree bear fruit. We pick the green fruit off. Yeah, it's green. Pick the green fruit off and we drop it there, so that those nutrients can go back into the soil. What will happen is this tree will put more energy now into growing leaves and stems, and that's what we want. We want it to be a strong tree. No, don't take the leaves off. We just take the fruit off there, and we can go into that in Leviticus and Deuteronomy too. So for the first 3 years, no fruit. We want to pick it off when it's green and put it back in there. First 3 years. The 4th year, we let it bear fruit. And it says there in the Bible, it says that the whole fruit or crop is an offering to the Lord, to the temple. Okay? And then it says from the 5th year on, you may eat of it. And then God says, if you do this, that he'll bless that tree. If you do this, your trees will produce far more over the life of the tree than if you wanted the fruit right away. There's an 80-year-old woman that I planted trees for one year in Shingle Springs. She says, I'm not waiting 4 years. Well, she was 80. It's not a sin to eat the fruit or whatever there. And so I planted them in February, came back in June, July, I guess it was, August, I forget. And she had ripe fruit, had good fruit already that season. So we went around looking at cherries and apricots and peaches and whatever there. And then she pointed to, she said, a plant over by the fence. She said, I don't know what's the matter with that grape plant. It didn't give me any grapes at all. So I went over and looked at it. Yep, sure enough, it was a kiwi plant. Okay, this is far bigger than most people would do to plant a tree, and it's way, way, way bigger than the forestry method, of course. But we want to just demonstrate. Do we have any water coming?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking, I'm missing something.
Okay. I just want to dump some water in the bottom of that.
Oh, this tree is nice.
Yes, this is a nice, healthy tree.
Yeah, no, fairly sure.
Yeah. Did we get all the fruit picked off of there?
Not yet.
If there's any fruit on it, leave it there, because that's what most people do.
The water is there.
Oh, we got a hose there? Let's just put the hose in the bottom of the hole.
Not long enough.
Oh, it's not long enough?
No, it's long enough. Oh, no? Oh, yeah.
Well, this hole isn't even big enough for me to put my ornery neighbor into it.
We're actually missing.
We're doing what?
Some sort of tree grant protection on that one?
We're not putting anything in.
On that one.
Just we put it on that one.
But there's nothing there, I'm saying. Right now, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
We don't have that?
No.
Well, we'll put it in that.
That's fine. Put it in half, sure.
How much water?
That's good. Maybe put it in the bucket for a while now. Okay, let's get some of this soil back in here.
Tell me when to stop.
Yeah, just keep, when it's full enough that we can put that tree in it.
You should follow instructions on the tag before you, so that's normal people will think you do.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
For comparison, we're just comparing, this is like a normal North American method without any special tricks.
But everybody puts something. Never something in without.
We're doing it for comparison. We're just doing
Just
it.
comparison.
Yeah.
Minimal versus full method.
Yeah. I was in Walla Walla, Washington, and we were planting 2 peach trees. And there was a lady, let's see how old that is. No, we need more. There was a lady there, she just had a fit because I wasn't being fair to that other little tree. But we're doing it for a demonstration and see the difference there. And truthfully, this is what a lot of people do, just that much there.
Yeah,
Let's put water. Let's put water in this hole again.
Water?
Yeah.
Agua. This is the bucket. The bucket's good. Okay. Right.
Yeah, the compression here, there's
You just go on, of course, they will tell you the tag. No, they'll tell you how the tag will tell you what to do. So that's normal, what they recommend.
That's good. Let's plant the tree and get out of here.
So would other people put fertilizer?
What about the direct?
Some people would and some people wouldn't. If you want a good tree, obviously you want to put fertilizer there. If you want an excellent tree, then you want to plant.
Yes, it's done.
Yep, just fill it in.
Rapido.
Yep, rapido. Okay. Nope. Don't worry about it. Incidentally, that position that tree, right, is much more important on citrus than almost any other tree. Citrus, if we turn them around backwards, we'll lose about 20% of the trees. In Canada, we'd lose them. You're right. You're right.
Whether you plant them any other way.
There's a guy in Nebraska that grows citrus trees, and he's got a special greenhouse and whatever up against his house. But he built himself the biggest citrus farmer in Nebraska. Yes, ma'am.
Agua.
H2O.
Let's go through that metal netting. Yes, there is. And in time, that will eventually rust away, but that'll be enough to keep the tree big enough. We got a little gopher in here now, you could use that kill system. And there's some trees that they like better. I mean, people are hungry and they've got keen sense of smell. And for instance, we can't grow figs here, but you can grow figs. I've had fig trees that big around that were killed by gophers just eating them. Yes.
All done?
Yeah, that's good. For now, it's washing away. We should water it again.
going to take much more water and sandy soil than this. Okay. Where are we in time? Are we just out of time, or do we have time to do a couple things back in the tent?